halt at the statue of Talos in Talos Plaza. And from there, you have to follow the breadcrumbs to notes and new locations until you find the person responsible for the whole thing. This one's tougher, but I'm not going to do a blow-by-blow rundown where you need to do this and go to that. Just look up what to do online if you're really curious. At the end of the quest, you unlock the ability to summon Mehrunes Harbinger, who you can talk to and get a selection of stuff from the Harbinger set.
With what do you want? Cut down your foes. Take it, mortal.
It works exactly like the rewards from Unwound in Time, so just grab everything you want. It's not exactly something players discovered. I mean, it's advertised as part of the deluxe edition after all, but it's 2 new official quests in Oblivion, so it doesn't get a lot more new than that.
Only this relic would be powerful enough to pervert the laws of Mundus to this extent. You must retrieve it at all costs, hero.
At number 9, the Unmarked Cave is finally accessible, normally. The original version of the game, there's a random location called an Unmarked Cave. It's mysteriously locked. There's no way to get inside. The key needed to open the door did not exist in the base game. Even if there was an entire dungeon locked away behind it, there was. The speculation is the cave was meant as part of an unfinished quest. Well, the remaster doesn't bring back the quest. It does make it so you can just go in. You don't need console commands or patches that aren't official. The door is still locked. You just don't need a special key. You can just lockpick it like any other door and you're in. It's not a small location either. There's 3 separate segments, including the first area, just called the Unmarked Cave, and then the Unmarked Cave Mazeway, and ending in the Unmarked Cave Black Queen's Hall, which sounds pretty ominous, but there's not actually anything interesting there. It's mostly just an empty space with a few monsters. There's no real loot or anything rare or interesting to find, but what do you expect? It's an Oblivion dungeon. Most of them are pretty much that. At least you finally get to this place normally and see it yourself, even if the reality is kind of underwhelming compared to the mystery of the locked door. It's still exciting to finally get a chance to check this place out on console versions. At number 8, the local map is still here. You just have to zoom in. The local map from Oblivion, it's the same, but actually finding it isn't quite as intuitive as it used to be. The local map is pretty helpful, especially when you're exploring a dungeon. To do it, all you have to do is hold the stick down to get close to the map. It'll transition to the local map.
They'll be coming in 30 seconds. Stay strong.
Unlike the original game, it doesn't switch to local when you're in the interior block anymore, so it's kind of annoying that you have to zoom in every time to actually see the local map, but at least it's still there. I wouldn't have put it past to just cut it entirely. They did it when Starfield first came out, so what's to stop them here? It's all false alarm. The map's still here. Functionality is the same. They could have updated it a little bit, maybe marked stores or important locations when you're in a town, but it seems like the dev team wanted to keep the remake as close to the original as possible, so the local map's the same, just a little more annoying to find and actually use.
The occult threats to this world are many, and they grow stronger. Nothing here. Suspicious. You're welcome.
A little help,
Good
please.
medicine.
At number 7, the repairing bound weapons exploit's still in. For many longtime fans, the first thing you did when booting up the remasters was see if the beloved exploits were still in or if they got fixed. And to be clear, some old tricks like scroll looping did get fixed, but this one did not. In Oblivion, there are spells you can cast or summon temporary weapons into your game. When the spell wears off, the weapon disappears. One minor improvement to the remaster is that you can holster bound weapons without them disappearing, and that's a good change. But with this exploit, you don't have to worry about that because the bound weapon becomes a real weapon. The exploit works exactly the same as it used to. You take any bound weapon, then repair it using a weapon repair kit, and then drop it on the ground. Now just wait for the bound weapon to expire, and that's it. You're done. The weapon on the ground doesn't disappear and you're good to go. It worked in the original game and still works here. It's not the most powerful exploit, but it's an easy source of money. That's a handy little trick.
Enemy in front of us. You're ready for
Magic on. We'd
And number 6, there's headshots now. Another aspect of Skyrim that got backported into Oblivion's headshots. You do bonus damage for hitting enemies in the head with ranged weapons. The difference is pretty significant. In the original version of the game, there's no location-based damage. Hit the head or an arm or a big toe, didn't matter. Meant the same thing one way or the other. The damage was always identical. Now, a little time and it makes the stealth archer build significantly more effective also.
I am ready to put on a show!
Sorry, you made this mess, Spectre.
Playing stealth is still pretty different from Skyrim because enemies are real quick to notice you, but with the added damage multipliers, it's a handy strategy that you can actually use and, well, get the chance to use it for that matter. At number 5, paintbrushes now have gravity. RIP to a real one. One of the best exploits from the original Oblivion is no more here in the remaster. In the old game, paintbrushes had the unique property of having no gravity attached to them. So if you dropped one out of your inventory, it would just float in the air. If that's all it did, it's just funny, not noteworthy, but paintbrushes are also found objects that have bounding boxes. So you could position them very specifically, and then you could jump, and you could actually stand on them. Before the remaster, you could just drop paintbrushes in the jump stairway to heaven. It was the most effective way to get out of bounds areas and perform sequence breaks. But more importantly, it was just fun, climbing up into the sky in a trail of paintbrushes. An iconic exploit. It's a shame they decided to nuke
The
it.
moon haunts us against the world.
It's from campaign.
Relay deploy.
Heard it in news from the other provinces.
You're ready for action.
And number 4, HP is now applied retroactively. We're getting into technical stuff here. So in old Oblivion, the amount of HP you get on level up was affected by how high your endurance was before leveling up. So essentially you had to focus on increasing endurance and making it a major stat because otherwise you'd have really low HP for the entire game. If you didn't focus on improving endurance early on, you'd be screwed in the late game fighting enemies with massive health pools while you barely had any HP. It was a flawed system that punished new players who didn't understand the weird way the game determined HP growth. In what can only be seen as a good change, the remaster makes it so all endurance health games are retroactive, meaning your health gains will be like if you increased it early on, even if you ended up waiting. It's a little confusing how it works exactly, but the big takeaway here is that players no longer have to make endurance a major stat because the growth will be the same no matter when you do it. You just don't have to focus on improving your HP early in the game anymore because now late game gains are the same as early game games. There are a few other reasons why this is less punishing. For one, you can increase stats that aren't selected as your major one, so when you level up, you can allocate stats whenever you want, so no more need to grind out certain stats to get where you want. Now leveling just takes care of that. So overall, the Oblivion remaster is a little less annoying and fiddly when it comes to stat growth. Maybe that takes some of the depth out of the character building, but I'll take it over the nonsense that you used to kind of have to deal with when you started a new character. It's one aspect of the old game that, at least for us here at Game Rants, is not going to be missed. It's pretty much unanimous here. Thank you, developers. Moving on to number 3, spell experience is now based on spell cost. It's another fairly technical change that you might not realize. In the old game, increasing your skill in various spell disciplines was pretty easy to exploit and also kind of annoying. Because the only thing that determined how much experience you get from casting a spell was that spell's level prerequisite. So you could just cast cheaper but higher rank spells over and over again and increase your spell experience. It was easy, but it didn't make a lot of sense. In the remaster, they changed it to a much more rational system. The more spell cost you cast, the more experience you're going to get from it. So more powerful spells actually get you more experience finally, and I think that's how it should have been in the original. That means it's in your best interest to cast powerful spells to increase your skill level in the new version of the game. Incentivizes you, to develop. It's simple, but it's sensible, and I think it rewards you very much for your spells. You can't just cast and shoot basic level spells all the time because it was more cost effective. The game now rewards and encourages you to cast more powerful and interesting spells.
The final 10 seconds!
Oh, I'm gonna get some revenge.
Stop right there, criminal scum. Nobody breaks the law on my watch.
And number 2, stagger is no longer random. Like, you only fall over when you're blocking the joke thing. It was really aggravating in the original game, and it's thankfully gone in a place that something makes sense. It used to be that there was a random chance that just doing about anything in melee combat would cause you to crumple, like you're one of those fainting goats, getting hit with heavy attacks, getting hit with blocking, attacking the blocking enemy, getting shot by an arrow, because you do flop over like an idiot, leaving them open and being pummeled by sword arms, and it sucks. It was annoying.
The current score is 0-1.
Increasing agility was supposed to
Time
improve your
to
chances
switch
of not
things up,
falling down, but
including
didn't
which
seem to help a
side
lot.
you're
So
on.
playing melee in Oblivion was a huge pain in the ass a lot of the time. With the remaster that completely
You'll need a
removed
top-notch
stagger,
team
except
to win
when you're
this one.
blocking after completely running out of stamina, that's the only time you're ever getting knocked down anymore. And that seems fair to me. At that point, it's kind of your own fault. There's got to be some kind of repercussion for trying to block while out of stamina, and getting knocked down is as good as any. It's little tweaks like this that make the combat in Oblivion Remaster feel a lot better. Even though it's essentially the same thing as the original, it just goes to show how a few minor tweaks here and there can make a actually pretty big difference.
Round 2, go!
There's nothing I can't fix.
Let's get this over with.
At number 1, grabbing is back. Yes, you can still grab physics-enabled objects
30
in
seconds
Oblivion.
before
Only
you
now it
attack.
works a lot more
Get
like
ready.
in Skyrim. To grab, you now have to hold down the interact button while looking at an object.
One
So, yeah,
sorcerer
exactly
to
like
another.
Skyrim. So use it
What's
to
the
decorate
source
your
of your
house or make a mess out of someone's
no
store or toss corpses around for your own amusement. It's a mechanically pointless feature, but it's an essential part of Bethesda games in terms of experience, so it would be a shame if they took it out.
The battle starts in 5, 4, 3, 2,
It's functionally identical to how it works in
All you
Skyrim,
need to
except
do is
it's
capture
missing
the
one
mission
major
area.
feature.
Got it?
Objects you're holding no longer interact with NPCs. While you're grabbing them, you just click through them. You can drop things on top of people and random objects and shove stuff around to amuse yourself, make a huge mess. But doing stuff like putting a bucket on someone's head so they can't see you stealing is just not possible anymore, which is fair. It wasn't possible in Oblivion. The physics also feel a lot closer to how they worked in Skyrim too. There's weight to everything, and it makes dragging bodies around kind of a chore, but at least it's still doable.
Oh, I'm fine. Don't mind me.
You're ready for action.
And that's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, please like it. If you're not subscribed, it's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to do this first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter and put me on Cameo at Falcon Hero. We'll see you next time right here on Game.
And we're back with another episode of Before You Blind, a show where we give you some straight up gameplay and our first impressions of the latest games releasing. As usual, it's me here, Jake Ballino, and today we're taking a quick look at Oblivion Remastered. Essentially jumping right into this is real firepower! Nobody knew it was coming, other than if you follow the leaks and rumors. So both myself and co-writer Eric, behind the scenes, we both jumped into it as soon as the game was available. Some first impressions and some thoughts. Now, me personally, I'm coming at this as an Oblivion fan. Morrowind is still my favorite, but I have done a ton of hours in Oblivion. I never really fully played it, so I was looking forward to this. It seems like a good opportunity to jump back in. And what we got here is the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered. And it's a looker. It's using Unreal Engine 5 for the visuals and Creation Engine for the game logic. So this hybrid of new and old is just a lot more than we were expecting. The visuals have been completely overhauled with all the newest bells and whistles you'd expect from an Unreal Engine 5 game, with high-resolution textures and completely new models for absolutely everything, like textures and stuff. It looks like a brand new game, but under the surface, it's the old Creation Engine, so it's essentially still the same game. It's got those original bones. It has what makes it special and kind of weird, but it's just a huge visual overhaul on top of it. The footage you see captured here is PC, but I also have some PS5 Pro impressions, and all this footage on screen is going to be spoiler-free. Long story short, this isn't a Resident Evil 4 remake style, like total reimagining, but it's also not just some slapdash elevated port either. It's Oblivion as you remember it, but with significantly better visuals across the board. It's not a perfect re-release or anything. I think hardcore Oblivion fans and some technical purists will have some issues with certain things, but I think definitely, like, if this is your first exposure to Oblivion, this is going to be fun for you to play. If you were only a Skyrim fan or something like that, essentially, you're getting a whole new Elder Scrolls game. Sure, it feels a little bit old, but there's just a ton of good adventure here. Because in 2007, Oblivion was a revolutionary game, but it really didn't take long for the shine to wear off on the videos. This new remaster takes one of the weakest aspects of the original game and completely transforms it. Now we're looking at what is honestly probably one of the best. It is a little more washed out. You know, maybe taking some inspiration from the visual direction of Skyrim there, but it still feels like I wish they had the color palette a little bit more one-to-one. There's a little bit more like biome differences in colors here and there to really make it feel like it's not like repetitive looking when you're out around the Imperial City. But I think for the average player, it gets the job done. Color palette complaints aside, like everything looks better. Specifically like enemies, NPCs, weapons, and towns. Man, it's been so weird to walk around all these towns that we spent so much time in the past, and now they're like fully realized and fleshed out. The graphics aren't the only thing that's being updated. They also added a few quality of life improvements here and there, and added some new voice work to bring in a little vocal variety to different faces. Because in the original game, it felt like there were like 3 voice actors. But again, this is still otherwise the same game, warts and all. There was an almost slavish dedication to being accurate to the original experience. They even made sure that the new voice actors matched the sometimes stilted, awkward cadence of the original performances. A lot of the bugs and exploits from the original game are still possible here. It's clear that the developers behind this remaster had some love and respect for original Oblivion and wanted to keep things true to the original experience. The dedication is admirable, but we would have liked to have seen a few more tweaks here and there to really make it the definitive version of the game. A lot of Oblivion still holds up, but the occasional thing comes along that reminds you that, oh yeah, for as good as this game looks, you're still playing a game from 2007. And some of that stuff could have been cleaned up a little more, maybe. You know, there are improvements to the core gameplay here. And while they're relatively small, they do make somewhat of a difference. The third-person camera is way better, as is the animation when you're playing in third person. At least except for the running animation, it's kind of funny. But there's actual hit animations when you strike an enemy, which does go a long way towards making combat look just a little less stiff and awkward. It still feels older. It still doesn't feel quite as responsive or like feedback heavy as Skyrim, but it's just slightly elevated. Now the mechanics of combat are
The remaster have the out.
those little bits and hit stuns give you a little bit more feedback, but the updated UI is really good. I think they did a really good job walking the line. It feels like classic Oblivion interface, but it's a lot more usable and easier to navigate. It's not the best menu, like it's not a complete overhaul. You still have to scroll through a lot of menus to find anything. Certain important items could have been sorted better. Like it would have been nice if like we got an actual notes tab or something in the inventory, but either way, I think this is another case where they wanted to be accurate to the original experience, so the actual menu options are the same. They just cleaned up the UI to make everything a little bit more readable and more at-a-glance friendly. They also added sprint, and it makes a hell of a difference. Pretty much works like it does in Skyrim, but this game has a lot of long stretches and a lot of traveling, really long distance. I will say the icons and the map icons and stuff are measured in steps, which is weird. We usually see distance measured in like miles or kilometers or something like that. Steps is kind of an interesting choice. It threw me off a little bit, but the sprint, again, just makes such a difference going from A to B, especially some of the Oblivion gates, which do still feel like a slog at the end of the day, but being able to sprint through them, I really appreciate. Oh, and now when you level up, you actually get to allocate stats. So you're no longer completely reliant on Oblivion's traditional stat growth. That means that even if you're only ever leveling up your magic skills or something, you can still put some points into strength and endurance if you want. It's a simple but welcome change that gives you a bit more control over your character's growth and not really get too boxed in. Character building is still a really good experience, like picking your stuff and going out there. And just to mention it, you can still make weird freaks in the character creator. All the
Which
faces
hero do you
still
think you wanna
have
be
some of that
today?
Oblivion vibe, but the character creator is once again detailed enough to just make a cool person or the strangest thing you've ever seen. And faces out there are very interesting. They look much better.
Now,
Emperor Uriel
who am I
Septim
gonna
looks a little
banish for
weird,
this
a little
match?
uncanny. You know, it threw me off. It took me a second to get used to, but obviously he's not around too long. But anyway, like I said, you build out your character. You essentially go through a pretty early dungeon, then you open a door, and suddenly you're thrust out into the open world. And the choice is all yours. That's where the fun really begins. And one annoying thing about some recent re-releases and remasters and stuff like that is that they try and nickel and dime you with new versions of their DLC, but Oblivion here is doing it right. It straight up just has every single official add-on from the original. So like you get the Shivering Isles expansion, which is great. Knights of the Nine is in the game, and all the little add-on packs are also accounted for. And yes, that includes the infamous horse armor, which changed the world. They are cheekily selling again as part of the quote-unquote deluxe package. In this case, it's more horse armor. The original sets
The
actually
right
come
heroes
with the
can make
base game.
all the
It's
difference.
funny that they're just doing it again. I don't support microtransactions and stuff like that, but I don't know, it's just kind of funny. The Shivering Isles are particularly stunning, but everything in this remaster just looks very good. As long as you're like willing to roll with the newer, slightly more desaturated visual style that we mentioned earlier. It's definitely a little bit more brown and gray than the classic game, but overall, I think it works. The lighting effects in particular are understated, but they look very good and make the world really pop at night this time around, compared to the original, where everything just looked really empty and flat at night. This is a really big improvement. Again, for me, I just kind of miss the big, deep, bright, high contrast blues and greens and, you know, the kind of dreamlike lighting of the original. But what they've done still here, I think, will work for a player, and like I said before, specifically for new players new to Oblivion. Some of the forests don't really have that same lushness, that same feel of the original game, but where you lose that, you just get a ton of details in the towns, the actual foliage and flowers and water and rocks and stuff like that. And keep in mind, this is a good remaster, but at the end of the day, you're still playing an almost 2-decade-old game with a new coat of paint. So for new players, there might be some friction. The quest log is just as weird and sometimes vague as it ever was. For the main quest, everything is made nice and clear, but for smaller side quests, it can be kind of confusing to figure out what you want to do sometimes. Sometimes the quest log doesn't even update when you get new information, so you better pay attention to your surroundings and what NPCs are telling you. And there's a lot of general jankiness of Oblivion too. You know, the scripted sequences, like how they play out, to how quests trigger that can lead to a lot of, you know, immersion-breaking little moments, and that's just part of the experience. There are bugs, and it's not just Creation Engine jank anymore. Now it's got like a whole layer of Unreal Engine jank on top of it. So you might get the occasional weird thing like robes not rendering properly, or this incredible physics bug that we managed to capture, where a Clamphere just went completely apeshit with place like an uncontrolled model rocket. And then in my instances, I definitely stumbled across a lot of enemies that just didn't notice you, or kind of frozen and not really doing anything. It wasn't like often, but I did experience it a few times here and there, so it's worth it for me. Also, on PC, the game did manage to crash a few times, full-blown Unreal Engine crash. It wasn't constant, but it did happen more than once. At least the game has autosave constantly now, so you're not going to lose much progress if something like that happens. Now on PC, performance-wise, we didn't have too many issues, but I will point out that Eric played on PC, I played on PS5, and unfortunately, I'm a bit disappointed with the performance. I expected a little more. This is a remaster of a very old game. It unfortunately does have some stuttering when you're wandering out in the open world. There are two modes, you know, like performance or fidelity or whatever. I keep it on performance, and while you're in dungeons and stuff, it's pretty smooth. You know, it's not dropping down to like 20 frames per second or anything disastrous, but it's not as smooth as butter
No, reset.
They are charging
Wait for
$50
Magneto.
for this game, and again, it's a game from 2007, so I was just hoping the performance would be a bit more rock solid here, man. And the thing about the Oblivion remaster is that you have to take the good with the bad. It's an old game, and like we said, it shows, but the original Oblivion just had a lot of really good stuff with it, especially some of the quests, and they're all retained faithfully here. Stuff like the Nightmare quest, or the one where you enter the Painted World, or of course, like the legendary Old Dark Brotherhood thing. All that stuff is here, and the game is better for it. Also, a main quest that I think is still pretty underrated. It's got some memorable moments, it's got some good performance, like some good voice acting, and this game just has endless fun. It did then, I'm so glad to see. On the other hand, there's stuff like the universally reviled level scaling system. If you're wondering if they fixed that or changed it really in any way, it seems like they didn't. It seems exactly the same, with the same overly beefy enemies and the same damage bonus armor. It's just as immersion breaking and annoying as ever. Enemies get beefier as you level up in the remaster, so just like they did in the original. So just like that 2007 version, it just feels like leveling up makes you weaker, not stronger. The enemies keep getting tougher while your growth feels more limited. It's annoying, and in terms of immersion, it just doesn't really make the most sense. Why was this tomb that originally just had some low-level skeletons and ghosts, suddenly now that I'm level 29 is filled with way more dangerous, crazy enemies? Like it only makes sense in terms of game balance, but with a remaster this authentic, I guess they didn't really have a choice. They had to stick with this because it's how the whole game was built. We would have preferred if they changed it to something closer to how like Skyrim handles enemy scaling, designated high and low level areas where there's more variation. But the entire quest system, like I said, I guess it was built around all of Oblivion's level scaling. So I guess it wasn't an easy fix. The only other negatives we can really think of is that some PC commands, if you're playing on PC, some still work, like the really simple ones like gear plating, but other stuff doesn't. And the fact that the game doesn't seem like it's going to support mods is unfortunate, because that's kind of part of the whole appeal of people come to Bethesda games like this. I'm sure some crazy people will practice it in one way or another, but more official mod support would have been really, really appreciated. So for better or worse, that's really the gist of the Oblivion remaster, at least with our first-hand experience, right? It's very much good for people who play Oblivion for the first time. If you're hardcore obsessed with Oblivion and you still know it ins and outs, it might not feel like what you really imagine. But still, at the very least, I'm glad that the developers didn't really compromise. They kept all the weird crap in here. They kept the parts of the game that are flawed, while also having all of those special moments and just making some of those towns, areas, and NPCs way more beautiful. And honestly, I can't help but just be corny here and be excited for people to experience Oblivion for the first time. The first time you see an Oblivion game is a holy shit game. The first time you step out of that first dungeon and see the open world is still a holy shit. Jumping into the Shivering Isles DLC is a holy shit moment. Going on that Dark Brotherhood quest, seeing the Maid Guild, just so many holy shit moments, and I'm glad they're all still. The mileage is going to vary depending on the type of player. Again, if you're a hardcore player, but if you're a new player, just go in knowing it's going to feel a little old, but if you're going in with an open mind, you're going to have it. I just wish the frame rate was a bit better on the PS5 Pro. Just come on. But that's it before you buy. You know how this goes by now. I'll give you some pros, some cons, and some personal opinions. And now I want to hear yours down in the comments. Honestly, we'd love to know your experience in general with Elder Scrolls, and specifically Oblivion. Is this your first time? It seems like there's a lot of people who are going into this for the first time. Or are you someone who has played it endlessly? Are you part of the modding community before? Are you part of the Sky Oblivion project, which we're still excited to see? Or maybe you're like some of us here at GameRanks, where you played it back in the day, you were obsessed with it, and then never looked back. So how are you coming at this one? Let's talk anything at all down in the comments. If you like this video and seeing the gameplay and stuff on screen here maybe help you out or inform your decision, click the like button is all you gotta do. It really helps us out. And if you're new, consider subscribing, maybe hitting the notification bell, because we put out videos every single day. But as always, thanks for watching.
We'll need a top-notch team to win this
Stop
one.
right there, criminal scum! Nobody breaks the law on my watch. I'm confiscating your stolen goods. Now pay your fine, or it's off to jail. Then pay with your blood. Fines.
loss and grief. But
You
the
cannot
future
save
belongs to
Yggdrasil, nor can you
mutant
save yourselves.
There's big budget, high production value, expensive AAA games, and then of course
30
there's
seconds before
indie
you
games.
attack.
But believe
Get
it or not,
ready.
there are games that fall somewhere in between. Games that have publishing
Asgard has been
studios,
invaded
some
yet
marketing
again.
behind it, but they're not usually like the biggest scale games with endless 100-hour campaigns or fancy high-tech new stuff or actors in their games. No, these games are just good, solid, old-fashioned video games. We call these games AA games because they're not quite
The battle
AAA,
starts in
and we talk
5,
about them a lot here on the
4,
channel, but today we're going to
3,
talk about 20
2,
recent AA
1.
games that really just spoiled us. Just some good stuff. Starting off at number
Go
20,
get that vehicle
Talos
to its
Principle.
destination.
The original one was such a weird drama, right? And philosophical puzzle game from the guys behind the Serious Sam series. What's crazy about the original, and by extension the sequel now here, is just how solid they are, right? They combine complex ideas, myth-like exploration, in these surreal but kind of strange environments. And then, of course, just good, solid puzzle solving. And the sequel is bigger, a lot bigger, with more of a focus on story, but that doesn't really detract from the puzzles at all, which all seem really excellent, while removing some of the elements from the first game that could have been a little more frustrating. So, for fans of the first, that makes the sequel a little easier overall compared to the original, but if that's your main problem, then you can just play the DLC, which apparently is significantly more difficult than the base game. The real meat here, though, are the puzzles, and they're just excellently designed. And there's a lot of them, too. This is not a short game, so it'll keep you busy for a while, taking in the sights, struggling with the meaning of existence, and pointing lasers around. You know, stuff that really matters.
The vehicle reached a checkpoint.
Next at number 19,
Keep up the
Atomfall.
momentum.
This Rebellion-developed first-person shooter is basically like British Fallout Light with a dash of Bioshock mixed in for good measure. It's also not exactly like either of those games. More of a focus on investigation and exploration over just questing and killing. The investigation aspect is what makes Atomfall really interesting. Every piece of dialogue you hear or note, you can find and add a clue to your investigation. It's a more organic and natural feeling kind of progression because there's nothing actually stopping you from advancing the game without following the investigation. If you're playing through the game the second time, you can just beeline for the relevant areas. It's actually possible to skip large chunks of the game if you want, if you're aware, or if you just figure something out. Games are often so bloated and overlong lately, so it's nice to get something like this where you can spend as much time or as little time with it as you want. There's not a lot of filler or time wasting, dialogues don't go on forever, and the explorable world is actually split into these relatively small, manageable, creative zones that are just dense with a lot of places to explore in them. It's not a massive game all told, but that actually works in the game's favor. It cut out all the filler so many games rely on, and it's just better for it. Yes, the actual combat isn't very good, not really much to write home about, but it's not bad either. Really, generally, it's just an all-around solid game that's worth checking out if you ever want to take a vacation to, the irradiated English countryside. It's actually surprisingly nice. Next at number 18, Dynasty Warriors Origins. This one is just a really pleasant surprise. After the disaster that was the last actual numbered Dynasty Warriors, which tried to go open world and fell flat on its face, this new one, Origins, just goes back to basics with the classic mission structure and a lot of much needed improvements. You only play as one character, which might be disappointing to longtime series fans, but the tighter focus allows for them to tell a more long-form story with this charming overworld map you explore between battles. The thing that's the real game changer here is the actual combat, which is more complex, interesting, and a lot more responsive this time around. It's practically a Devil May Cry game now, but with like the pure power fantasy that comes with Dynasty Warriors games. Like you're still mowing down enemy armies by the hundreds, but now officers and bosses are actually fun to fight and can be
Which hero do you
challenging
think you
rather
wanna
than
be
just
today?
annoying. In general, it's just a more polished, more fun Dynasty Warriors. It's the best game the series has seen in years, and is well worth checking out, even if you've only got a passing interest in
Be
these
wary.
games.
No time.
Next at number 17, the recent South of Midnight. This is a very double A game, despite being backed by Xbox Game Studios. It just feels smaller scale. It's story-based, it's linear, it's got simple third-person combat, a little bit of wall climbing, some very light platforming. It just is a video game, a regular old-fashioned one, and it's also surprisingly good despite its small scale. The story and the vibes are charming, the controls are simple and responsive, and although like it takes a while for the game to get going, once you got all the baseline powers unlocked, moving around in the world is just fun. It's simple. Don't expect platinum level combat though. The combat we've actually found kind of annoying, but thankfully there's not too many encounters. There's like a good balance between the styles of gameplay. The real star though is the presentation, visuals, graphics, all that. It's pretty fantastic for a game that's clearly working with not like the most massive budget. They managed to do a lot with what they have, and the stop motion like animation gives the whole thing a scrappy
Pick your
but
hero.
endearing
Or
energy.
villain.
I know
I'm
we
not
didn't get
judging.
time to make a before you buy for this, but some of us did play it here, and although it is flawed, it's not perfect, it's just a cool game with some unique bits, so maybe consider checking it out. Next over at number 16, there's a lot of Souls-likes in the AA genre, and while you can argue that this whole thing is being kind of saturated, there are still plenty of solid ones, especially recently, case in point, the first Berserker, Kazan. This action game looks AAA in the cutscenes and character models, but clearly AA in the environments and stuff, which are pretty uniformly bland and generic. The environment design is definitely the weakest part of the whole presentation, along with a bizarre lack of draw distance, kind of making everything feel small.
seconds
But the
before you
quality
attack.
of
Get
combat
ready.
makes up for any deficiencies. Like, the game just feels good to play. It's
Things got
extremely
Morgana after
responsive
the
with
vampires
a lot
caught
of
us by
depth
the
to the
Queensboro
combat
Bridge.
mechanics, which
Oh,
you'll
me
have to
too.
master if you want
You'll
any
never get
chance
to
of
do it
surviving,
the same
because this
day.
game is also extremely hard. The
No
boss fights
way.
are brutal.
got
They
weirder
always
from there.
have like
I'll tell you about it
double the
sometime.
amount of health you'd expect and require almost pitch perfect precision to get through.
The
You have
battle
to
starts in
slowly
5,
chip away at their
4,
health bars while they can
3,
kill you in like 2 or 3
2,
hits and tend to be
1.
absolutely ruthless
All
in
you
their
need to
attack
do is
pattern.
capture the mission
Look,
area.
this game is
Got it?
not for the faint of heart. The bosses are
A
no
threat
joke, and they
against
only
Krakoa
get somewhat
is a threat
easier
against all
as you
mutants.
really begin to
We
master the
shall
combat
not
system.
abide.
This is a game that requires mastery. Next at number 15, with the AA games world, you're either getting games that mostly just directly copy games, a little lower budget, and then you get stuff like Eternal Strands, which is definitely borrowing a few elements from other games, but mixes it all together to create something relatively new and unique. There are elements of Monster Hunter and Breath of the Wild in Eternal Strands, but the final result is something that doesn't quite feel like either. It's an ambitious game. It doesn't quite hit as hard as some of the games it's inspired by, but it's still got a lot of positives going for it. I like the Shadow of the Colossus inspired bosses and the large environments to explore that have a bunch of secrets. There's powerful magic spells you can use alongside 3 different weapons. So you're highly versatile in this game with your abilities. The amount of mobs that inhabit each area does get a little tiring after a while, and the actual amount of big monsters isn't that high compared to something like Monster Hunter, but this game isn't all about hunting big beasts. It's more of an adventure game hybrid with some elements of like a Monster Hunter mixed in. The presentation of the story is where you can really see the game's more modest play. You know, they rely on pretty static character images for dialogue, and it's not always the most fulfilling thing in the world, but everything else about the game looks pretty good, especially the environmental design and the skybox. It's fun and relatively ambitious as a first attempt that can be a little chaotic and frustrating on occasion when the spell effects get out of control, but mostly it's a really good game. Next at number 14, here's another one of those games that just feels right, like perfectly properly mixed in the presentation of the game. It banishes Ghosts of New Eden, but in this case, it's actually a little better and more accomplished than you first might expect. Now, the core gimmick of the game is the split protagonist mechanic, where you play as both a ghost hunter and his dead ghost hunting wife, and you can switch between them on the fly. This is a major aspect of exploration, yes, but combat that has been viewed negatively by some, but it's one of the things that's actually pretty fun.
with the amazing Spider-Man!
It's a fairly linear story-driven experience at first glance, but Vanishes is actually a pretty large kind of RPG with big environments to explore, lots of quests and side quests and NPCs to talk to for hours, and the writing really is another strong element, especially with the missions that task you with investigating a haunting. That's the whole thing as a ghost hunter. You walk around, you talk to NPCs, you put clues together, and try and figure out why someone is being haunted, and then choose how to banish that ghost. And this is one of those rare few RPGs where you actually feel the consequences of your decisions, too. Most major quests force you to make a big decision, and they affect things in some creative ways. Now, the combat may be a sticking point with some, but we had fun with it. And there's always options to lower the difficulty if you don't like it, because story-wise, RPG mechanics, dialogue-wise, it's just a game worth checking out. Now at number 13, Still Wakes the Deep. This short-form horror experience isn't all that long. You know, you can finish it in only a few hours, but there's a real quality on display here. It's a real graphical showcase. It looks almost unnervingly realistic with the right lighting, and even the character models look really convincing, which usually some AA games kind of drop the ball in that department. What makes Still Wakes the Deep stand out among all the other horror games is its personality. This game has an authenticity that most games really lack. You can tell the
30
developers
seconds
are
before you
Scottish
attack.
because the
Get
voice
ready.
acting and dialogue all just feel very true to life in that specific way that can't really be replicated. And that commitment to realism just really makes you care about the characters when everything inevitably starts going wrong. As a horror game, it's not actually all that terrifying. Not to say it's not scary, because it can seriously be just from seeing whatever twisted, bizarre monstrosity the game
The
throws
battle
at
starts
you.
in
But the
5,
straightforward mechanics and just the
4,
general
3,
forward momentum of the game
2,
makes it so things never get
1.
too overwhelmingly
All you
scary.
need to do
I'd
is
say it's
capture
more
the
like
mission
Soma
area. Got
vibes
it?
than Alien Isolation's terror. It's well-paced, the checkpointing is forgiving enough to keep certain segments from getting tedious, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. It's just a solid title. Next at number 12, Flintlock, Siege of Dawn. This sort of God of War-like game is a little rough around the edges, and a lot of people wrote it off when it first released, but we played it, and the unique world and the fun gameplay mechanics actually make it possibly worth checking out on sale. Basic combat is a little stiff, but what makes this game more interesting is the exploration and the world that's a lot more vertical than you normally get in one of these games. Moving around is a lot of fun, and jumping and gliding through the air around these very open, epic locations is kind of cool. It's a game that isn't the best and really leans on story and world building that just isn't that interesting. But the weird visual identity and the mix of platforming and just running around and killing stuff makes it better than the sum of its parts. Generally, it's just a fun little ride. Next at number 11, Earth Defense Force 6, or EDF 6. Is this technically AA? Look, all these are kind of nebulous. It's not an indie, and it's definitely not AAA. It's maybe just in that space that doesn't really fit any category, but who cares when you've got a game that's just this absurdly entertaining. The Earth Defense Force series has been chugging along all this time, making more and more absurdly over-the-top games that are both basically all the same and also more. Honestly, the 6th game in the series isn't that far off, gameplay-wise, from the first game. And that's a testament to just how satisfying the core gameplay is. There's just nothing better than blasting bugs and alien freaks in a giant battlefield. And this game has some of the biggest alien battles in the series yet, along with some of the craziest aliens. This time around, there's actually a little bit of plot, and it's truly insane. None of it matters at all, and it's all just background noise while you're blowing up giant bugs, but there's something uniquely hilarious about the weird delivery of some of the most insane dialogue compared to the Earth Defense Force games are a unique experience that are low budget as hell, but are just a lot of fun. They understand what they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're charming. And the newest game in the series is up there with some of the best. It's definitely the longest, at least. It's got like over 140 missions.
Don't mess with the amazing Spider-Man!
Next over at number 10, Mech Warrior 5 Clans. Now, Mech Warrior 5 has always been a fun time, but what it's been missing is a really solid, structured campaign. This standalone expansion to the game gives it exactly that, and makes it easily the best Mech Warrior thing to come out since the legendary Mech Warrior 4 Mercenaries. Considering the production values of the rest of the series, you'd expect this game to be pretty bare bones when it comes to the presentation, but no, they go all out with some actually pretty cinematic cutscenes and lots of dialogue and many elaborate and intricate missions to undertake. It's all the more impressive because you can tell that they're still working with a somewhat limited budget. The shaky quality of the voice acting gives that away, but everything else about the game is just high quality and fun. The level design is awesome, the cutscenes are long and much better directed and framed than you'd expect from a game of this type, and the actual story that's being told here is interesting. If you're gonna play anything Mech Warrior related that's come out in the last 2 decades, then definitely check this one out.
Which Which hero do you think you want to be today?
Sensors still suffering some interference. No readings on scanners.
Next over at number 9, Aliens Dark Descent.
Be
Combining
worried.
Aliens with
No
XCOM real-time
timeline
combat just
exists where
sounds like it
Magneto
could have been
lives.
either the greatest idea in the world or a disaster.
who am I gonna
Thankfully,
banish from
it
this
turned out
match?
awesome. This is a pretty overall impressive game that's like sort of an action RTS where you take a squad of 4 and explore these massive abandoned locations, searching for resources, completing objectives, avoiding aliens when you can, and engaging in combat when you absolutely have to. It can get desperate. The game can be a power fantasy 1 minute, you know, you're doing your space marine thing, and then just a horror show the next. When you're fully stocked and ready, it's exhilarating mowing down swarms of aliens. But when your resources start running out and your soldiers start to crack under pressure, which is something you actually have to manage, then things can cascade out of control pretty quickly. There's a real risk-reward element to the game, where you want to spend as much time in each location as possible, getting as much done as you can, but not overextending yourself and your crew and getting your precious soldiers killed. The gameplay is fun, but the presentation is what really makes the game work. It looks great for a top-down game. The environments are highly detailed, and the presentation of the story, while not the greatest,
need a
still
top-notch
manages to
team to
be
win this
somewhat
one.
compelling. If you like Alien or Aliens and you like tactic games, this is definitely one worth considering. It flew under some people's radar.
Never thought I'd be trying to breach my own security perimeter.
Believe me, I know how you feel.
Alright. Guess you do it, man. Ain't life so?
How about you deal with that stress, squad?
Round 1, go!
Past is mired in loss and grief. But the
Next, number 8, RoboCop Rogue City. Now, I know we've talked about this one a lot.
30
I
seconds
am the
before you
RoboCop
attack.
fan
Get
here at
ready.
Game Ranks, though, so I force my agenda into every video. Look, it's
Even the
not the
astral
perfect
realms are
game,
torn
but
apart
for
by the
RoboCop
time stream
fans, I don't know. I think it is. There's a lot of talking here for a game that should be just about blowing away criminal scum non-stop, but when this game is on, it's really on. It looks great too, and to give the devs credit, they really did bring back Peter Weller as
The
Robo,
battle
and he's
starts
pitch
in 5,
perfect. And when you
4,
are actually
3,
shooting, you know, blowing
2,
away bad guys, it
1.
is very satisfying, if simple, but that's the point. The RoboCop, you're
Get
walking
that vehicle to its
like
destination.
absorb a huge amount of damage, so combat sections feel more like shooting galleries than like intense first-person shooter levels. But even still, with that simplicity, they managed to shake it up throughout the experience and make it fun. Like I said, the game also looks surprisingly good, surprisingly authentic. A lot of locations are practically photorealistic. The gore is awesome. The destruction is cool. Again, if you like RoboCop, if you haven't played this, what do you do?
I'll patch you up.
I feel like myself again.
Next at number 7, Destroy All Humans 2. The original Destroy All Humans game were really like a type of games you don't see anymore. Well-made, but weird-looking games with an actual budget behind it. Now, it seems like oddball projects like this are trapped in the world of the past, and you only ever see this type of obsessive creativity in indies. But with the series revived by THQ Nordic here, we now have a whole new generation of games to bring back with a slightly new coat of paint, honestly. For the most part, this enhanced version of the second game is good. It takes everything from the original game, cleans it up a little bit, but not just to remain the same mostly. The controls are somewhat modernized, but the jokes aren't. The game is a lot more self-aware than the first, just some real groaner lines and lame jokes every once in a while. That's part of the charm. And on the flip side, there's also still plenty of clever stuff. They might catch you off guard with an obscure reference or some fourth wall breaking comment that is actually pretty fun. When it lands, it really lands.
Judge,
Is much longer.
jury,
Destroying
executioner!
fun and quirky with some of that cool, mean-spirited energy of the 2000s. Kind of nostalgic.
Myself again. I have tagged them all. Low-key gone.
This is real firepower!
I unleash the Vishanti's power.
Enjoy the
as little nightmares, but not as hardcore as Resident Evil. You know, it might sound like a hard pass for many, but Guild is a good game that's actually mechanically engaging enough to play. What helps is that it's actually fairly open. Closer to Resident Evil in structure than you might think. Here, you just have to sneak around monsters on top of exploring and finding keys and solving these simple puzzles. It's just a surprisingly decent game. Overlooking with some solid production values and a darker story than you might think.
We shall not escape our wrath now.
Down to 30 seconds.
Someone scratch my back.
Lesson number 5 is Spawn. This is a focus interactive game. You know what that is. It's like a surefire AA style game. This semi-open world action game actually got a pretty big 2.0 overhaul just recently. That actually fixed a lot of the problems we had with the original version of the 45. So now this is a game that's pretty safe to recommend, especially when it's on sale. They chopped up the very boring tutorial section and made it a lot faster, so now you can get into the actual meat of the game, which is good, because it's pretty solid. The combat is aerial and floaty, but in a good way, kind of old school. Big chunky dodges, all your attacks have this massive range. It's sort of a cross between the original God of War games and a modern big action RPG. It's combat you never see in games, and it's pretty interesting. Just don't go into it. Moving around is great. Sliding across sand dunes, jumping around. A lot of the movement powers in the lock are just fun to use. So again, story is not great, game is not perfect, but there's a pretty interesting, strong core here if you're into these types of games.
Is a mutant's greatest gift. You need not fear. Much better.
Next at number 4, Hot Wheels Unleashed 2. Now, this toy-based racing game sounds like it's just some bottom-of-the-barrel shovelware, but it's actually fun, and it improves on the surprisingly great original in important ways. It's still this blisteringly fast racer where you zip around as a tiny car on these over-the-top impossible tracks, but now the level design is more interesting and diverse, and the vehicles feel more unique in how they actually handle. The first game was a lot of fun, but the maps really started to run together after a while. This game doesn't have that problem. Its stage is set in a museum, gas station, and arcade to add some real visual variety, along with just some more interesting aspects. It's just an all-around simple, fun game.
This is real firepower!
Down to 30 seconds.
Seems we have company.
And next down at number 3, Ghost Runner 2. This sequel isn't quite as groundbreaking as the first, but what it lacks in some originality, it just makes up for her with fun variety. More enemies, more very interesting locations. The addition of motorcycles to really spice up what is already a blisteringly fast full game. So combat here is fast and brutal. Just one hit and you're dead. So quick reflexes and precision are really the only ways to survive. Think sci-fi, cyberpunk, first-person Hotline Miami. And Ghost Runner 2 adds a few features that make the game a little more forgiving, like a proper block button, but it also ramps up the difficulty accordingly with bigger fights in more complex arenas, along with just more interesting, a bit more challenging boss fights. The real highlight, though, is the motorcycle. Those levels are just nuts with how fast and intense they are. You gotta see them to believe them. They're really cool. And with the game being longer overall, the occasional diversion into a puzzle-focused level is actually welcome, rather than being kind of a drag like in the first. It's essentially more, but better. So if you like Ghost Runner 1, you know, the sequel might do it for you.
Much better.
number 2, Lies of P. This is one of the better Souls-likes of the last few years. Or it's got the crowd-beating heart of something that doesn't feel quite triple. These games
This is real firepower!
and Lies of P has both. The world is interestingly weird, the enemy designs are both whimsical and grotesque, and the actual combat mechanics are just finely tuned. The game is a satisfying challenge, but not as brutally difficult as something it gets consistently more difficult as it goes, but it still mostly plays fair. It's just a well-made, cool game that really has all the usual strengths of the subgenre, while also just feeling like its own unique thing. Look, it's no Bloodborne, but just being in the conversation next to that legendary game says enough. Lies of P is great.
0. Time to switch things up, including which side you're on.
Be wary. No timeline exists where Magneto yields.
The right heroes could make all the difference.
Now, down at number 1, if there's any game that tells us that AA isn't quite dead, it's Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. This game was made on a budget less than half of that of Doom Eternal, which I think we can confirm it as AA status, even if the actual polish, the marketing, the quality of the visual might lead you to believe it's actually AAA. Well, the core gameplay loop is just pure old school too. It's linear hack and slash shoot where there's a lot of hallways and corridors and arenas, just smashing endless swarms of alien monsters. It's simple, it's satisfying, and it doesn't overstay its welcome. The inclusion of a packed-in multiplayer mode and co-op just make it feel even more of like an old-school simple gaming package. Something with a simple campaign, some cool multiplayer to keep you busy for a while, and then you move on. What we like is that ultimately the developers here are updating, they're giving us new things, but they didn't make a game that's designed to just last forever and continue to get new from you. It's not a live service, it's a game you play for a while, and like I said, you move on. And in the age of the forever game, 200-hour open world games, you really gotta respect this. Those are 20 recent AA games that just outright spoiled us. Just some cool games we wanted to talk about today. It's going to be positive sometimes, so let us know what you think in the comments. If you enjoy any of these games, or if you have any other games that you build AA, let us know in the comments. It always helps for people to see more games, more recommendations. So hit us up. If you like this video, click the like button, all you gotta do. It really helps us out. And if you're new to this, as always, thanks for watching.
The moon haunts you!
People who play video games, people who buy video games, people who talk about video games, all have a healthy amount of skepticism. I think at this point in the game, gamers are naturally skeptical of things, you know? But sometimes it's just really good to be proven wrong. And on the flip side, sometimes the gaming corporations themselves have their own expectations or ideas, and those are proven wrong as well. So today we're talking about good and bad examples of video games that prove everyone wrong. Starting off at number 10, we have Death Stranding, where initial skepticism led to universal acclaim. Now, when this first released in 2019, it seems like gaming media at large didn't quite know what to make of it. It was a unique and weird game. Was it bad? Was it good? It didn't seem like there was real consensus at the time. There were a lot of people in the room that just did not jive with what the game was really throwing down. If you look at IGN's review for the game, where they gave it a 6.8, which for a highly anticipated game, that can draw some heat. Say what you will about IGN, but props to them for sticking to their guns and sticking to their opinion with that one. The game had its defenders early on, but there were also plenty of people who just did not like the gameplay at all. Keep in mind, we're not even mentioning the story. Even among people who like that game, that's divisive. But the real thing that ended up proving everyone wrong was the gameplay. Mainly, that there was actually an audience for it. Death Stranding was like the world's first AAA fighting simulator. Think about it, the primary goal of the game, and the thing that spent most time doing is just running from one place to another while carrying a bunch of cargo. That's the game. A lot of it is just about walking. There's combat, but it's de-emphasized, and there are some metagame elements and creative stuff and online features, but those only augment the main thing, the walking. And there's a surprisingly large group of players out there who are all for it. The game, which at first seemed like it would just kind of be an oddity, ended up just being a big hit. These days, all you ever hear is praise for Death Stranding. Every so often in my comments, I see people making fun of me for liking it. Again, there are people who do think it's overblown, it's overhyped, but at this point in the game, with how much it's sold and everything, you'd hardly even realize how polarizing it really was when it first released. Of course, that doesn't actually change anything about the game itself, just how the general game zeitgeist, perceived, which is just a complicated way to say that we all know what Death Stranding is now. The people who would like it get to play it, and the people who already know they're gonna hate it just stay far, far away, and that's fine. Next at number 9, Silent Hill 2 Remake. Nobody thought Bloober could do it. I will fully cop to this one. I will fully confess. We all thought that putting Bloober Team, the guys behind the popular but mechanically simple games like Layers of Fear, the 2019 Blair Witch game, the medium, conceptually a mistake. Silent Hill 2 is one of the most loved and respected horror games in 30 years. It's just a foundational game. It's incredibly unique. Bloober Team were the guys behind the medium, which, like I said, was kind of like an undercooked, kind of misguided Silent Hill knockoff. There was no way they were going to do the remake justice, right? Well then, the game came out to previews and reviews, and people still didn't believe it. I hardly believed it when I did the before you buy, when I played through the game. I was right along with everyone else, assuming that this was going to suck, and did not really do the original justice.
I am ready to put on a show!
The remake is.
Behind them.
It didn't shit on the original, it didn't disgrace fans. They actually managed to expand and somewhat modernize some gameplay moments in important ways, while also still just making it feel like the same game. Bloober had done the impossible. They actually managed to make a great Silent Hill 2 remake. And honestly, for as skeptical as we were, it's great to be wrong about something. Like, I will totally admit to that.
Now might be a good time to stop them.
Next at number 8, I think we all assumed the new Astrobot game was going to be good. I mean, the Astrobot game packing the PlayStation 5 was great. The ones getting proven wrong this time around weren't the fans, but actually seemingly the execs at Sony. And the overall prevailing wisdom that games like this, number 1, don't sell, number 2, don't get awards at all. With Astrobot, they were proven to be decisively wrong here on both fronts. While the game wasn't some unprecedented success, apparently they managed to sell 1.5 million units in just 2 months, which is very solid for a mid-budget kind of Sony game like this that they apparently weren't expecting a lot from.
Well, you can't expect to win them all.
While Sony was dumping billions into a disastrous live service initiative, the team behind Astrobot were quietly making the game that they wanted to make. Sony has, for years, just kind of undervalued some of its Japanese studios. So it's really something to have a year like 2024 where so many Sony projects failed, while a game like Astrobot managed to not just succeed, but also sell and win massive acclaim. I mean, it won multiple Game of the Year awards. And it's not like 2024 was a bad year for games. There were some serious contenders, and Astrobot still managed to come out on top. Even if you disagree, you gotta respect the craft. They built a good game here. Of course, winning the Game Awards isn't like, you know, this like big signifier of ultimate quality. It's not definitive, it's up to opinion, but it just does show how highly respected the game is. Next over at number 7, Cyberpunk 2077, the game that many thought would never be fixed completely. Rarely do you see a game going from like social media and just media in general, like the punching bag, to the kind of positivity Cyberpunk 2077 currently enjoys. They really managed to turn this whole thing around. Not since Final Fantasy XIV have we seen a game's reputation take a complete 180 like this. It might be hard to believe now, but it cannot be understated just how easy a target Cyberpunk 2077 was when it first came out. A common refrain we remember seeing a lot back at release was that Cyberpunk 2077 wasn't just messy and flawed, it was fundamentally broken, and no amount of fixing would ever turn the game around design-wise. There were video essays that came out the first year of release saying stuff like this. They weren't saying that Cyberpunk was flawed but had potential, they were saying that the whole project was DOA. They were saying that this time the CD Projekt Deluxe Edition wasn't gonna save this one like it had done for them in the past. That was the general consensus too. A lot of videos, a lot of articles, a lot of places, a lot of comments just had Cyberpunk on their worst of all time list. The game was just a big target for a while. And now, looking back, it all feels really dated. The 2.0 update, along with the expansion and everything, completely reversed opinions on the series. Sure, some people will never forgive CD Projekt Red and some of their conduct during this whole situation, but now the common belief is that the game was actually always good underneath, which, you know, depending on how you look, might be an exaggeration. The game was in a rough state for a long time and was deserving of a lot of the criticism, but you've got to respect the devs for really managing to change perceptions about the game.
Sometimes it's just safer to shove the barrel of a Malorian between the crew's ribs, even if he is on your side. It's nothing personal. No hard feelings, I hope.
Here's hoping they really learn from this and their next game releases don't pull any of these moves. Next at number 6, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, and the fact that the market for AA games hasn't dried up. This is another one of those oft-repeated pieces of common wisdom from the studios, is that gamers don't want AA games anymore. Apparently, they don't want games that are middle grounds between small indies and massive $500 million games. Space Marine 2 proves them wrong. All the AA needs is a game that looks good, that plays well, and actually gets a decent amount of marketing behind it. This game ended up being one of the biggest surprise successes of the year. Back in November, it managed to hit 4.5 million copies sold, which is more than 3 times the original Space Marine sold back in 2011, which is astounding considering that this game came out more than a decade later and is being made by a completely different developer. Look, I don't know if it just shows the strength of the Warhammer IP in 2024, or that there's just more of a thirst for these types of games now, or what, but the sales speak for themselves. So many publishers want to do small indie nothing or go all in with like trillion-dollar games, but they don't always have to be so scared. They can find that middle ground with something like a Space Marine 2. There is a market for these kinds of games, with like a 10 or so hour campaign, an extra multiplayer mode, and some co-op. It's not a 100-hour open-world grind fest. It's not a live service, endlessly playable thing. It's just a game, and sometimes that's all you need.
Should I know?
Next over at number 5, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and the proof that bigger isn't always a guarantee for success. It's not all happiness and sunshine here on this list. We gotta splash a little cold water sometimes. So Final Fantasy VII Rebirth underperformed. There's no getting around that fact. They said it. It's a thing. So far, it's only sold around half what the first game in this new trilogy sold. When the sales numbers came out, certain gaming communities went into full-on crisis mode. People were having, existential crises in the comments section. Gamers were melting down left and right. How could a game this massive and this excellent underperform? It makes no sense. Now look, for as much fun as we like to have with like Rebirth and suspense around here, what Square managed to make is really impressive. It's a real accomplishment of a game that's massive, highly polished, and expertly made from top to bottom with compelling characters and cool stuff. But unfortunately, making a game doesn't always mean it's going to sell more. But unfortunately, as we've seen, these things are unpredictable, and making a good game doesn't always mean it's going to sell more. In hindsight, Rebirth had a lot working against it. For one thing, tapping into the nostalgia well might only have worked once, especially with massive releases like these Final Fantasy VII Remake games. Casual fans dipped in for the first entry, got their fill of Final Fantasy nostalgia, and I guess seemingly didn't come back around for round 2. The somewhat mixed
You need to
response
stop
to
that
Remake
vehicle in
also
tracks.
may have hurt sales for Rebirth. You see this phenomenon happen with movies all the time, where a bad movie makes massive bang in the box office, and then the sequel comes along that's better in almost every way, but it underperforms because everyone was mad at the first movie. I think with Rebirth, it's less that everyone hated it, and more than it just wasn't what everyone wanted. It was highly linear, it was scripted, and kind of railroady, where Rebirth wasn't. It was wide open. But it made me consider that some players were already turned off by the first game, and not as interested in another go.
A little help, please.
It could also have been like chasing trends. The Final Fantasy name just isn't quite what it used to be. There are so many reasons why Rebirth ended up selling less than many expected, but all that really matters is that, at least in this case, the assumption that a sequel will always sell better than the first is just wrong. Next to number 4, Black Myth Wukong. Some people believing that it was vaporware or not real or not as big as it was. This game was viewed with a lot of suspicion. I don't know if people were just kind of very unfair. Scam games that looked good and then ended up not being like the day before. But for us, it was like, wow, this is crazy. Those graphics are good, right? But the game's not really going to look like that, right? All the stuff in the trailers isn't actually going to be in the final game, right? There's no way there's more than 100 bosses like they said. That's absurd. It all might sound ridiculous now, but there were some red flags. I mean, this is like a studio making their first big, almost AAA game that looks almost impossibly good, especially back in 2020. It just seemed like the final product will be compromised in some way. Players have had their hearts broken before. We've seen things that look this cool, and then it releases, and it's not, right? Some people were thinking about short Supernova! Right? So then when it came out, it looked exactly as good as they had been saying and showing, and the final game included everything we saw in the trailers and everything the developers said. Game science, the developers behind it, were being totally straight up honest. The trailers weren't BS. All was just exactly what it looked like. Now look, the final product wasn't a perfect game or anything, but it was exactly what had been promised, and that was refreshing, and I think people really embraced that.
I suck. You stop them in their tracks.
I feel like one
Next at number 3, Nier Automata. In a recent interview with former PlayStation executive Shuhei Yoshida, he credited Nier Automata for nothing less than reviving the entire Japanese games industry. That's maybe laying a little too much on the feet of Nier, but there's no denying that the game was a massive breakthrough hit in the West that, as of December 2024, has sold over 9 million copies. During the 7th generation of consoles, the Japanese gaming industry seems like it was having an identity, and a lot of pundits and industry people at the time were saying that Japanese games weren't hitting, but some people really just disliking or knocking on the output of the entire country's development scene. And it was a weird time, to be honest, like all these classic developers bringing in Western studios to modernize their games, their genres, their franchises, and while some of them turned out okay, many did not. Nier Automata, at least to Yoshida, proved that they could make a game that was primarily meant for a domestic market, and it could still be a big hit overseas. Developers don't necessarily have to tailor their game design to other markets. They can make the games they want to make, and foreign gamers will play them regardless. If a game is good, no matter who made it, people will show up. This wasn't something that happened everywhere. Games like the Souls series, many JRPGs are still coming out at the time. We're slowly chipping away at that cultural barrier. It's just that apparently for years, games like that were considered most profitable things, that now, out of nowhere, these kinds of or at least they have the potential to be. And when you're talking about markets and sales and stuff like that, perception is reality. Now, everyone thinks that Japanese games will sell. So everyone starts taking Japanese games seriously again. And they should.
I shall not be removed so easily.
Not quite.
It's the grand finale. Better stop that vehicle. Down to 30 seconds.
I feel like myself again.
Against the world. They hit a checkpoint. Now might be a good time to stop them.
Next over at number 2, Star Citizen, their
not be
continued
removed
existence
so
proves
easily.
something. As Star Citizen really lurches into its
Better stop
unprecedented
that vehicle!
13th year in development, what, if anything, can be taken away from their decade-plus run
That one
collecting
hurts.
over $800 million? That number puts the game in the same company as like some of the most expensive games ever made when you think about it, up there with stuff like Genshin
shall
Impact,
not be harmed.
Black Ops Cold War, and potentially Grand Theft Auto 6, just to name a few. That's frankly absurd amount of money to run on a crowdfunding game. Sure, the game is still not finished, and it has all these promised ships that everyone is buying that still need to fully materialize. And the promised campaign mode Squadron 42 does keep getting pushed back, despite it looking pretty cool. But the promise of Star Citizen, I guess, was never really about an actual just game release, done, dusted. And the guys at Robert Space Industries seem to understand that better than anyone. It's something the doubters and the haters don't really understand here, and that's the power of wishful thinking. It's the power of possibility.
Supernova!
And
30 seconds.
the people spending thousands of dollars on ships in Star Citizen, you're buying into a dream for people who feel like these tiny things that they dreamed about when they were kids, and you can literally do anything, be anything, go anywhere. It's the imagined version of the space reality. Nobody thought they'd be able to keep going this long, keep getting this much money, because we just don't understand how psychologically powerful this promise really can be. This hope. Of course, even that power has limits, and they may face struggles as this game still doesn't release. But for a while there, it did seem like they had really tapped into the infinite reach of the real mix. Love it or hate it, look, I know people love to dunk on this game, and I know people also love to run to the defense of this game. Either way, you have to admit that the whole situation is fascinating.
A little help, please. Better stop that vehicle. Don't give them another inch.
Now down at number 1, the Castlevania Dominus Collection is proving that Konami is capable of making a new Castlevania game. Castlevania, of course, is just one of Konami's most beloved IPs, and unlike something like Metal Gear, where so much of the series' identity is wrapped up in its original story, Castlevania has been around long enough that anyone can potentially make one of these things, and nobody will be the wiser. So, it was kind of bizarre how Konami just refused to make a new entry in the series. Even when the game's cultural imprint was at its strongest, with like a popular Netflix series and multi-indie developers collaborating on Castlevania themed DLC, you'd think Konami would try to ride that wave somehow, right? Nope, they just kept going, not making anything but at a certain point, all that's left is to assume that Konami is just done with the game making business. That's the only excuse why they haven't done anything with the franchise for years. So they put out another somewhat overpriced re-release with the Castlevania Dominus Collection, only there's something very odd packed in with the DS era games, and that's a new Castlevania game? Okay, look, calling it new is kind of a stretch, but like it's a remake of the notoriously tough Haunted Castle. But it's so different that it might as well be a new game, and it's very good. It's not like groundbreaking or amazing or anything, but it's a really good remake of a pretty bad game with great music and nice chunky sprites. It's just way better than it has any right to be. And for some reason, it's hidden away as a bonus feature in a collection of games it doesn't really have much to do with. Maybe it was meant to be like a DS Shop exclusive or something, who knows? The remake was made by M2. The guys who did the WiiWare exclusive Castlevania Adventure remake, which is also much better than it has been.
30 seconds
So
before you
Konami
attack.
is
Get
capable
ready.
of making a new Castlevania game, sort of. Even if it might actually be like a decade old and they just never released it, who cares? It just shows that anything is possible, and if Konami actually put their mind and their money to it, they could do something well. But those are 10 video games and situations that proved everyone wrong. both in good ways and bad. Let us know in the comments what you think. I'm sure some of these topics will be
battle starts
divisive,
in
but
5,
it's fun to chat about, so let us know
3,
what you're
2,
enjoying, what games you
1.
think we should use in another version
All you
of
need
this
to do
list,
is
anything
capture
at
the
all. If you like
mission
talking
area.
games with us,
Got it?
clicking the like button helps us. We put out videos every single day. But, as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Believe it or not, some of our favorite glitches in video games were just too good for this world. Instead of ignoring some of these tricks and exploits, some developers ruthlessly fight back against the community. And while we don't blame the developers, some of these glitches were really fun. But unfortunately, here are 20 unintended mechanics through like glitches and stuff that players discovered and then developers killed or fixed. Starting off at number 20, one of the most memorable glitches from the Soul series, the Dragon Head glitch, allowed players to reuse items over and over again. Basically, it was a simple dupe mechanic, giving you the power to max out your levels by earning this infinite supply of souls very, very easily. To get this glitch actually working, intrepid adventurers needed to reach the deepest, darkest, secret area of the game, Ash Lake. Now, getting through Blighttown and reaching the Great Hollow isn't exactly a fun ride, and if you're not careful, the basilisks can just like totally wreck you.
You are under my protection.
Please.
There are shortcuts to reach the bottom of Blighttown very, very early. Actually, you can essentially skip the entire area if you use a shortcut through a dragon-infested canyon. At the bottom of Blighttown, there's like a huge tree. You'll need to know where there are 2 illusory walls here, which was one of the little like dirty secrets in the series. Then after that, you trek down the interior of the giant tree. It's full of these curse-giving enemies that are so annoying. And then at the very bottom, you'll find the Ash Lake and the Path of the Dragon Covenant. By joining this covenant, you'll get the Dragon Head Stone, which turns your head into a dragon and lets you shoot fire at the crossing stone. It's a fun little item that we all used in a way that wasn't intended. By quickly moving the camera and swapping equipment in the inventory, you're actually able to reuse items as many times as you want, totally breaking the game and making it one of the toughest games ever. Now, this is one glitch exploit mechanic that still isn't available unless you still have access to an untapped game. If you don't, you're totally out of it. And this is just the first of many exploits you just can't do anymore, so let's keep going. With number 19,
Mutants
Elder Scrolls
always
Oblivion.
rise again.
Goblin Wars are an urban legend, kind of like Bigfoot or UFOs. You know, we all wanted to believe Goblin Wars are real, and maybe they are, but nobody can get this weirdly involved feature of Oblivion to actually work anymore. We've talked about this one in the past. There is a simple explanation for why this doesn't work anymore. Goblin Wars was a half-baked idea that was kind of barely implemented and then broken by patches by Bethesda. It just does not work anymore. And even when it did work, it was essentially a cut feature. Like, they clearly didn't want this in the game. While we don't know for sure what the developers were thinking, after experimenting with Goblin Wars for hours and hours, it does feel like a classic case of feature creep that simply broke like one too many of lines of code that was changed in patches. But I buried the lead here. Basically, Goblin Wars was a simulation mechanic that allowed players to pit different tribes of goblins in the game against each other. So by stealing this totem from one goblin tribe and placing it in another tribe's cave, goblins would then form this war party and then march on into their enemy's cave, fighting and spawning until the game basically busted from too many goblin spawns.
Shields up! I should be reckless now.
I feel like myself again.
Old computers weren't meant to handle entire armies of goblins spawning in one tiny little cave. Even when the feature did kind of work, it was incredibly finicky. And it isn't really clear if it was actually a feature. Some tribes don't work with other tribes. You have to place the sacred totem staff in the same room as the enemy staff, but sometimes not. it's a mess of a mechanic that was never documented by the developers. People had to figure this out completely for themselves. Shout out to the community. And now even the mods meant to restore these weird features are busted thanks to, you know, the never-ending onslaught of patches. Goblin Wars might be our white whale, but the next glitch on this list is like a video game glitch. At number 18, the most infamous glitched Pokemon in the series is Missing No. And we all encountered this strange glitch. This was all the way back at Pokemon Red and Blue. The first Pokemon game in the series definitely holds a special place in a lot of our hearts here because it's a miracle that this game even fits on the Game Boy at all. The magic the developers had to do to make this game work is actually really impressive. We're not here to tell you like a really old game is really impressive. We're here to talk about the duping items or duplicating items. So encountering glitch Pokemon like Missing No would automatically duplicate items. Whatever the 6th item in your inventory was, you then get 128 copies of it instantly. It was awesome. The best item to duplicate, of course, was rare candy because that stuff levels up your Pokemon instantly. So by running into Missing No here, that's kind of like whatever is going on with it.
By the eye of Agamotto!
You're basically farming 128 levels. This build back away would take years and hours and hours, so it made this glitch pretty essential for freaks like us who wanted to collect all 150 Pokemon and then also level them up like crazy. This glitch, unfortunately, doesn't work anymore in later releases for two good reasons. There are way better ways to earn levels, and these glitches had a good chance to actually crash your game. The worst crashes could permanently corrupt your save file. That's the punishment, I guess, for digging a little too deep and too greedily. Now over at number 17, you probably know the best weapon in Dead Rising was the small chainsaws. A pair of handheld weapon chainsaws dropped by Adam the Clown, one of the earlier bosses. The clown fight is like a tough fight, but the reward is worth it. These chainsaws are awesome. They respawn whenever you re-enter Wonderland Plaza, and they're crazy strong, and they don't break too quickly. The only downside is that they break at all, and we can actually fix that. So you can't repair items in Dead Rising, but you can extend their durability by collecting special books. Magazines like the engineering book make tools more durable. Holding the entertainment book makes any entertainment items last longer. Even better, the effects of each book are multiplied. If you get all the books that apply to the small chainsaws, you'll multiply their durability 3 times over, boosting the durability to 2,160 attacks. That's a lot of dead zombies. It's just too bad the remake fixed this issue by making these small chainsaws only spawn once instead of an infinite number of times. Still, if you've got the item slots, this trick lets you use the small chainsaws for the entire game. Much better. Next over at number 16, we love taking down a seemingly impossible opponent, and the Reaper enemy in the Persona series absolutely counts. This seemingly unstoppable enemy spawns in the randomized dungeon levels of Mementos. If you linger too long in any one level of the dungeon, then the Reaper will spawn and chase you down.
Always rise again.
The final 10 seconds! You need to stop that vehicle in its tracks.
He's incredibly powerful and will pretty much wipe out your party really quickly. Early in the game, there's like no defense against this guy, unless you start to get a little creative. So during certain days in Persona 5, the weather will affect enemies in the Mementos. When it's raining, enemies will then succumb to a severe despair. During blue season, an actual in-game event, there's a chance, a very small chance, that enemies will get a status effect kind of replicating that they're sick from the flu. And after 3 turns, that enemy will die instantly. And yes, for some reason, this actually totally works on the Reaper, this seemingly impossible guy. All it takes is a little wind chill and this guy like dies of depression or sickness or whatever. If you can survive 3 rounds, which is actually very difficult, he'll die and just dump a giant pile of XP on the player. This is actually one of the best ways to farm for experience in Persona 5. And the developers unfortunately fixed it in the enhanced Persona 5 Royale version. So no longer can you like cough on the Grim Reaper to get him sick and die for easy XP.
Be wary. No timeline exists where Magneto yields.
You'll need a top-notch team to win this one. Just like I thought.
Next at number 15, as great as it is, Fallout New Vegas might be the winner for the most bugs per second. And there are so many exploits and unintended mechanics in this game. Not even remotely all of them were patched. Most of the exploits, like selling guns of different conditions to the vendor over and over again, are still fully functional in the latest versions of the game on Steam. The simplest exploit we like the most is all about Mantis legs. So even during the tutorial, players could reach max level by collecting a stack of 6 Mantis forelegs.
30 seconds
These
before you
basic
attack.
junk
Get
items
ready.
drop from the giant Mantis enemies and aren't too difficult to find. Many are found right in goods crates. Raid the schoolhouse to get all we're gonna need. Then collect a stack of 6, and the experience points just start rolling in. By transferring Mantis legs from one container to another, like, you know, moving those Mantis legs from a lootable body to your inventory, there's a chance you'd earn up to 1,000 XP randomly. Why? Who the hell knows? It's just another weird secret of this wasteland. Sly couriers like us could reach max level before leaving the tutorial town. This was fixed pretty fast, but there are so many other glitches that it's almost as easy to use. The standard Mantis legs from the base game don't work anymore, but the giant Mantis materials from the Zion Canyon region still work in the same fashion. It's just another reason why New Vegas is one of the messiest but best games ever. It's just like another weird reason to love it. Next over at number 14, we're jumping from one Bethesda exploit to another. These games are meant to be exploited in weird, glitchy ways, and Starfield, the most recent, is no different. Definitely Bethesda's biggest game yet with all the planets and, like, you know, the city sizes and stuff. Starfield might have been too much for any single developer to tighten up before release. There's so much in here. It's inevitable that they miss something big, like boxes of items buried just beneath the game world. So here's how this trick works. All vendors have a physical container that has all their money and items that exist in the game world. Normally, these containers aren't accessible by the player because they're placed outside the bounds of the explorable settlements and cities. They're literally underground, buried beneath the vendors. But players quickly discovered that some of these boxes are actually reachable. By looking at the ground and crouching down, we were able to get just close enough, like right there, to a vendor inventory to then just rob them around. Of course, you were never actually meant to find these boxes, so they're not marked with a theft tag. You can just do it. You're free to steal everything you want, sell everything you want, and wait until the stock respawns with literally no punishments. It is one of the first fixes Bethesda implemented pretty quickly. You know, it's a harmless little glitch that only weirdos like us would have ever noticed. In the time since the initial release, a lot more problems have been patched out of Starfield, but we'd love to get that glitch back. It was kind of fun. You can still steal if you're playing on PC though, and you use console commands to fly under the planet. Next at number 13, one of the most fun glitches on the nothing to do with leveling up or earning money or anything like that. Instead, we were able to turn our trusty Steve Current into a time machine to skip like every part of the game. By following a specific series of actions, a lot of loading, reloading, and nudging your mount off ledges, Torrent was actually able to permanently fly. By glitching and respawning Torrent through one of those dreaded death planes, which are basically areas of the map where you'll die no matter what, Torrent then becomes totally unable to fall. It can't drop any lower than its current height, so you'll only fly higher after each jump. This trick lets you skip straight past the first major boss and his big castle, which is actually pretty cool and all, but like the real prize is skipping straight through the castle, ignoring the fire giant, and then just reaching the end game. Getting around it is a lot easier too, even if performing this trick is extremely finicky and pain in the ass and probably not worth it unless you're looking to just kind of not play the game the real way or skip a big boss. It's great for speedrunners, but not so great for the rest of us. That isn't true at all though for this next glitch on our list. At number 12, here's another exploit that's all about flying. In Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, of course, the Ultra Hand ability unlocks infinite possibilities for the player to build all kinds of contraptions or just mess with the physics of the world in clever ways. And one of the clever things Link can do is turn a floating object into a speeding jet that